In part two, we may discuss the reasons why moral relativism is not justified. In the first part, we already defined moral relativism and grouped it into two types. One type is social culture relativism, and the other type is ethical subjectivism. In the following session here, Sean refutes those two types of moral relativism, and he begins with ethical subjectivism. Um, he asks us to think about if right were determined solely by individual attitude, and everyone in the society has their own moral principle to judge what is right and what is wrong, what a model situation would that be? Would we just imagine, would we return to the state of nature and live a life of necessity, poor, brutish, and short? If I am the only person who decides what is wrong, what is right for myself, and nobody else judges me from his or her point, I could never be morally wrong because every moral judgment is from me, from myself, right? Similarly, you judge yourself, and everybody judges himself or herself. Nobody judges others. That is a very weird and model situation here. And in terms of conflicts, we are sure go back to the state of nature. That is why ethical subjectivism is absolutely unjustified. And for the other type of moral relativism, the social culture relativism, Shaw refutes its positions gradually. The first reason he gives is similar to what Marimigini gives to moral isolationism. That is to say, if relativism is true, we are unable to judge other cultures. Ethical relativism basically undermines any moral criticism to the practice of other societies as long as their actions conform to their own moral principles or their own moral standards. Suppose some countries still practice slavery. According to moral relativism, other countries cannot say a word. Suppose some culture support that wealthy people can have as many as spouses as they want. And also suppose other cultures still consider eating strangers is a valuable social custom, only because all those practices conform to their own moral standards. Okay, so most people, I have to say, most people from developed societies and even most people from those cultures which had practiced those centuries ago, they would condemn all those practices nowadays, right? And the second point is the fact in reality, we not only judge other cultures, we even judge our own um, cultures. Sometimes we criticize certain principles or practices accepted by our own society. As we mentioned earlier, U.S. criticized slavery more than other countries. And for other cultures, they also sometimes criticize their own conventional or traditional culture or social custom in the history. The third point here is about the reformers, such as Abraham Lincoln, just for example, Martin Luther King, and even broadly speaking to the very first generation of American immigrants. For those people, they fight against injustice and bring social and moral reforms to the society. If ethical relativism is right, then their reforms and efforts amount to nothing, right? So beside these reasons, um, Shore also mentions some other reasons here. For example, he mentions that as a large country of immigrants from all over the globe, America is very heterogeneous. And America is actually enriched by very diversified cultures, traditions, for example, from Europe, from Middle East, from Asia, from Africa, and so on. Uh, it would be very difficult to for American people to collaborate if morality is only decided by one culture. And also, there is a practical question here to ask, according to Shore, in a heterogeneous country like US, how do we decide on what is right, what is wrong? Do we just vote? Then what proportion do we agree is the point that we adopt a policy? For example, for abortion, do we decide 90% agreement or 75% agreement or 50% agreement? If we decide 50% agreement, how about just imagine last year it was 51% of the people agree abortion is legal, and this year only 49% of the people agree it is legal. So, do we have to change the policy from last year to this year? And how about next year if the figure jumps back to 51%? Are we supposed to change the policy back again? Right? So those are the real issues here. And also for small societies in the U.S., for example, the author, he lists several examples here as small societies and small communities in the U.S. Harlem, San Francisco, rural Iowa, and also the Chicano community in Los Angeles. So all those societies, small cultures, they have their own roots, history, and cultures. Sean asked us to think about should they just set their own moral standards. And he asked us to consider what if some of those cultures um, they value outlaws, drugs, and also probably underworld. So here the question is, we wonder what moral relativism would respond to the situation here. So, give all those considerations above, um, the author came to the point that ethical relativism only produces absurdity. And we can read from the entire quote here. By contending that the morality of different societies are all equally valid, the relativist holds that there can be no non-ethnocentric grounds for preferring one moral code to another. That one cannot speak of moral progress. That means if moral or ethical relativism is right, then we can never make any moral reforms or moral progress. Morality may change, but they do not get better or worse. That means if we accept ethical relativism, then there could never be better or worse. For those reasons here, Sean considered that ethical relativism must be false as a theory of normative ethics. So those are the reasons for the author to consider why ethical relativism is totally unacceptable as a theory of normative ethics.